my perspective is always, I've got to make enough money and to be able to support our family. And hers is always, I've got to be home enough to support our family.
Mm-hmm.
It's a completely different way of looking at life, right? And that comes back again to, we're not equal. We're completely different. And we should be. But yeah, the mechanism there is, when I am failing and it becomes a trend, she will call me out. And when she's failing and it's becoming a trend, I will call her out. And our kids are the exact same way. So it's pretty evident when you're a close-knit family when somebody is not pulling the way they should.
How have you fostered that? Because I know there's a lot of families that wouldn't be able to do that, right? They wouldn't be able to support hearing that or feeling that or seeing that. Like, what is it that you guys have done inside your family that has caused you to be that tight knit and close to be able to, as my daughter is sitting here at the door, sure, bring her in. So now you get to see my daughter. So this is one thing I was going to tell you before the podcast, is that sometimes family shows up and
what's up, little lady? Hi. What's up? You say hi. You say hi. Say hi, Mr. Dan.
I was going to tell you before the podcast that I don't care if kids show up. It's a podcast about being a dad. So sometimes kids are going to show up, and in this case, it's the littlest one. Usually, what's that?
Keep that kid out of here.
Yeah, no kidding, right? Jeez, don't you know I'm working? Don't you know I'm working? Get a little hiccup. Get it on the microphone, or headbutt the microphone. That's cool. So what have you? Obviously, to me, it starts at the very beginning with you and your wife. But kind of talk me through, how have you guys fostered that with the kids? That openness to be able to call each other out in a loving manner, as opposed to what could turn into an abusive manner, like, oh, you never do this in the house, and like that's obviously not going to be conducive to what we need. So, how have you kind of fostered that, and how have you worked through any issues that have popped up from that?
I'm going to tell you what, that's a fine line, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
It's very difficult. And the Reed family is a very prideful family, and we know that. It's very easy to hurt our pride, and when somebody calls us out, it doesn't feel good. We don't like it for the most part. So the manner in which you do it is pretty paramount. And I've failed at that probably for most of my life, on how I correct my children or how I bring issues up to my wife. And she's the same way. When we first were married, she would just say, "Hey, that's really stupid. Why are you doing that?" As opposed to coming back and saying, "Hey, Dan, I noticed you did this. Why? Why would you have done that?" "Well, do you think you could have done it better this way?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I see what you're saying. I get it." And that's one thing with my kids as well. Sometimes I'm not as eloquent as I could be, and I recognize that. And so when I correct them, depending on how mad I am about the situation, it will depend currently on how well we communicate in that time period. But a lot of times I'll ask them, like, "Hey, why did you do this?" And I want to give them an opportunity to kind of give me their logic or their reasoning. And sometimes, I'm like, I didn't think of it like that. That's actually a better response than I expected. And so that's an easier way to have a conversation and correct, or at least give advice on how to do something differently. And I always, in my past, would jump to conclusions, thinking that I'm the smartest person in the room, and assume that what they're doing is just stupid, and they never thought it through.
Mm-hmm.
The fact is, most people are fairly intelligent, and when they do something, they do it for a reason. They actually did think it through. You just aren't bright enough to figure out why they thought that way.
Yeah.
And if you can get over yourself just a little bit and understand that you aren't the smartest person there, just have a conversation, and let's initiate some of those conversations first before you start correcting. It's better to understand the situation as a whole, as opposed to jumping to whatever thought you had was correct and correcting that.
Yeah. I was listening to why am I forgetting his name? Can't Hurt Me. David Goggins. I was listening to his second book yesterday while I was mowing the lawn, And one of the things he said is like, even in battle, it's very difficult, but you have to take a knee to assess the situation around you and figure out what's going on. There may be bullets flying, but you still have to take the knee and understand where the enemy is, where the things are going on. And in life, you have to do that from time to time as well and take a knee. Like, how many times have we heard, take a knee and hydrate, right? Like, that's just what you do. But I was never taught any reasons behind it other than the fact that we need to hydrate, and, taking a knee is giving you a rest, right? There's never a why behind it.
Time for the little lady to head on back. Love you, sweetheart. Say bye.
Bye.
Oh, thank you, Camille.
So like, I was trying to ponder that as I was, mowing the lawn. Like, how can I do that with my family and be able to, take that knee and understand what's actually happening, why somebody's responding the way they are, why things are happening the way they are. I'm huge into why, which for those of you who don't know, that's not always the best thing in the military. They don't necessarily want you to ask why. They just want you to do things. But I have a tendency to ask why an awful lot. And I teach my kids to ask why, and I want them to. So if I can understand the reasoning why they're acting the way they are, that immediately helps me to be able to respond better. And so I really appreciate that thought process. So what I was pondering in my head yesterday, I was like, okay, well, if I how can I take a knee in life that gives me that perspective that I need? And to me, reminding myself that you don't have all the perspective. Like, if I'm in the middle of a conversation between me and you are in the middle of a conversation, I don't have all the perspective on the conversation because I don't know why you're saying what you're saying, what you're thinking about. The only thing I can do is keep asking questions to understand. And the more I get to understand, the more I get to see the rest of the perspective, which will then help me to make better decisions. And I try to fostering that sort of thing with the family is difficult, right? And really being able to say, okay, well, it takes so much work to be, it was a couple podcasts ago, I was chatting with somebody who's like, it's so much easier to be a mediocre or a bad dad than it is to be a good dad. It takes a lot of work to be a good dad and be involved and ask those questions and go through the motions of actually trying to be a good dad. The amount of extra conversations I have to have with my boys, about anything, I don't care if it's right at the moment about, why is baby Diana under a sheet on mommy's chest? Okay, well, there's a lot of questions we can have about this, right? And I need you guys to know that. I need you guys to be comfortable asking me these questions and need to be able to go through these things, right? But later on, it's going to be a lot more difficult questions to work through and work on. And if I don't foster the open communication and relationship now and teach myself to do that now, then it makes it so much harder later on.
Yeah.
Can you?
I totally agree. And one of the biggest problems I had being a dad and being in the military is I have two different worlds where I have to act like two different types of people.
Oh yeah, yep.
Right, and so I've always had a decent commute coming from home and to work and vice versa, where I try to get into a different mindset. And I've noticed that over the years I've kind of loosened up a little bit, but in my early years in fatherhood, I was very rigid. And I was not approachable in any way. And I would tell you to do something, and I just expected you to do it. There is no conversation. Your dad told you to do this, go do it now, and I want you to do it very well. And if you don't, then I'm going to criticize you for not doing it well, and then we're going to have a disciplinary issue after that. And that's the wrong way to do it. It doesn't create any sort of loving environment. This is just rigid. My dad told me what to do, and that's what I'm going to do, and that's it. But as I've gotten older, and I've gotten a bit more experience, and especially now that we have a grandchild, you can kind of see exactly where you screwed up in life. The older you get, the wiser you become, if you're paying attention. And you can look back and say, man, that was really dumb. I should not have treated my children that way. I shouldn't have treated my wife that way. At the time, I thought it was right. I thought I was making the right call, and I can't blame myself for that. But looking back now, I was just an idiot. And I think most men generally are idiots until they're about their mid-30s.
Ain't that the truth?
Sorry. It's just the way it is. I mean, we do. Women always tell us that they are smarter than us, and you know what? If we were smart enough, we would have believed it.
But we were too busy knowing everything. So
and they generally are smarter than us, and they're and they can see things differently than we do, and God made us that way. And so you got to listen to your partner, and you got to listen to the criticism that they're giving you, because honestly, they're just trying to help, and they're usually communicating with you in the way that you present yourself to them, that they think that you're going to take it in the most effective way. And if you come home and you're extremely rigid and you're always very direct, that's probably how they're going to communicate with you. And if you don't like that, then change the way that you are with them, and that'll help out the conversation.